to date on News Talk.
Second half is 2.5 minutes old at St Mary's in tonight's lone Premier League encounter where Southampton lead Brighton by 1-0. If you've not seen that Pierre-Emile Højbjerg opener for the Saints with 10 minutes to go to half time, then you're missing out just almost like a golf shot from distance from Højbjerg into the corner of the Brighton net, and Southampton leading by 1-0. Shane Long starting tonight for Southampton after that toe injury ruled him out of the Republic of Ireland's games with Wales and Poland. Ireland, meanwhile, won their first ever team medal at the World Equestrian Games today. The team of Cathal Daniels, Sarah Ennis, Sam Watson and Padraig McCarthy finished in second, just behind the gold medal team from Great Britain, while McCarthy claimed individual silver in the jumping event. He placed behind Rosalind Cantor of Great Britain. The tip native is Ireland's first individual medalist at the competition in 40 years. Time for the football show.
The Football Show on Off the Ball.
In association with the faster than ever Boyle Sports app, with hundreds of pre-live and in-play football markets. Download it now. Boyle Sports. Time to play.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Presently, Southampton leading Brighton by 1-0. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg the scorer, but the Keith Andrews show was live earlier today on all our social channels, those being YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Owen Shane and Gary Breen joined Keith to look back at the weekend's Premier League action, which saw man of the moment Declan Rice produce an excellent display.
Okay, we want to kick off with yesterday's game, the 4 o'clock game yesterday. Obviously been in the news for very different reasons in the last few weeks. Declan Rice and his performance. So we're going to just stick to his performance yesterday, okay? I mentioned that the first game of the season, West Ham's performance against Liverpool, the fact that he got dragged at half-time in the midfield of Jack Wilshere and Mark Noble. I felt there was a little bit of a cop-out. He was hung out to dry. There was certain components missing from that midfield. He certainly wasn't one. I felt there was a real lack of energy. Obiang comes into the team yesterday, probably because Jack Wilshere was injured, but it looked like a different team, and him playing in front of the back four, again, showing the traits that we've all been talking about since his debut for West Ham, what he's shown on the 21s for us, Premier League level when he has played in that position, and even left-sided centre-half or in a back five last year in the David Moyes. Just so impressive. Just again, so impressive, so efficient in the way he goes about his business. It was a masterclass in a holding midfield position yesterday.
Because that's the thing, if he was Irish verified, let's just say, then he plays in that position yesterday and you're like, perfect. Yeah. That is exactly what Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane want to see from the club manager who is looking after Declan Rice. That exact position right in front of the centre halves, because just thinking about their performance yesterday, I may be getting a little bit ahead of myself and I may be putting a little bit too much weight on the performance of Declan Rice and Pedro Obiang yesterday. But I think there's a little bit of the Crystal Palace last season about this West Ham team. You know, clearly a terrible start to the season, and of course Palace changed their manager last year and that led to a huge upturn in fortunes. I think West Ham are that team this year who could go on that rocket surge up the second half of the table. I'm not saying they're going to finish in the top half, but I'm saying I would not be surprised at the end of the season if we see West Ham in 11th or 12th position.
I think anything less than that is underachieving. It really is.
Less than 11th or 12th. Do you not think that they're in a relegation mire? No.
I thought struggling. I still don't think it's kind of smooth sailing from here on. I think he's got issues in terms of personnel, finding the right balance of the team, the midfield being a prime one. Will Jack Wilshere be content coming off the bench? Well,
he'll have to be. Like, that was their best performance yesterday by a country mile.
Let's have a little look before we move on to the balance of the side. Let's have a look at Declan Rice's stats from yesterday. Okay, 40 passes, 83% pass accuracy, gives it simple, 1 dribble 1, 5 tackles, interceptions, clearances, block shots, duels 1. It's just all very, very impressive. And if you tally that up to if somebody else wants to kind of play in that role within the midfield, Wilshere, we've seen it at times in the base of a midfield for England, being that kind of orchestrator, the one who's starting phases of play off in possession. Out of possession, liability. Mark Noble, mobility, big issue. Very good player in possession, gives everything for the cause. Obviously, West Ham through and through. But I just don't see Declan Rice coming out of that position, and he shouldn't do. I had Tony Gale on the radio this morning, and he watches West Ham a lot, and he's basically saying that Declan Rice is West Ham's best centre half at the moment, and I wouldn't disagree with that. For Ireland at the moment, and hopefully that will come, he's a holding midfielder, because I think we've got better options at centre half than we have probably centre midfield, certainly holding centre midfield. But for West Ham, he has to play. It's as simple as that. I think yesterday kind of just probably reassured Pellegrini as to exactly what Declan Rice can bring to the table. Don't mind reputations. You have to go on current form, and I suppose it's certainly the way your team has started, pressure's on. Look, Wilshere being injured has probably done him a favour going into that game.
Well, you mentioned the reason why he's one of the best centre-halves in West Ham is because their centre-halves aren't great. Like Balbuena and Diop tend to be their first choice centre-half pairing. So you wonder if Declan Rice goes on a period of form now where West Ham are tough to beat, where West Ham pick up a few more wins over the next month or two, that increases Declan Rice's stock even further, because it's much harder to do that. It would be easier for him to do that in front of Shane Duffy and Kieran Clark, regardless of how little possession Ireland tend to keep, than it would be in front of Balbuena and Diop. Not to mention they've got Arthur Masuaku at left back, who I think is one of the worst full backs who has a starting place in the Premier League. That really Pablo Zabaleta at right back is the only defender that plays behind Declan Rice, which I would consider to be good enough to start week in, week out for a top Premier League team. But yet at the same time, I look at the way that midfield was solid yesterday. You look at the performance of Marko Arnautovic yesterday, who, despite the Yarmolenko goals, was clearly the player of the day for West Ham United. There's no question about that. And when he's on form, he's one of the players to watch. And like, you do wonder if Jack Wilshere brings more of the fluidity between attack and defence together for a Premier League team. There may be an argument there, but there is no question when it comes to the solidity of a rigid midfield three that Declan Rice, that even Obiang bring more to the table than that. So
if Wilshere comes into the team, right, it has to be at the expense of Mark Noble. Because the other traits that Rice and Obiang, well, I wouldn't totally rule that out. I think Noble gives you more all around. Wilshere, if he is fit and he's able to get around the pitch well, look, I think I'm not his biggest fan. It's not that I don't admire certain of his qualities, but I just feel for a number of years now we haven't seen that consistently enough. People obviously point to the injuries and the way he was on the periphery at Arsenal. I've seen him a lot at Bournemouth, and I think that's a real test as well. When you go to Bournemouth and you're with lesser players, you need to stand out. He simply didn't do that. And anybody that tries to tell me any different, whether that's Eddie Howe when he was singing his praises, or Arsene Wenger at the time when he was talking about his player that was on loan, I thought it was nonsense. I really did, because there was other players within that Bournemouth team that were shining far greater than Jack Wilshere, I should say. But West Ham, go back to your point about 11, 12. Do you not think that's a minimum requirement, having spent 100 million on 9 players, shelling out big dough? That's not even taking into consideration Jack Wilshere's wage package and the length of the contract, etc.
Well, I suppose when you look at the other contenders to go down, if they're finishing below Huddersfield and Cardiff, first of all, it's an absolute calamity. So that only leaves one more relegation place to be sorted out. So yeah, they have spent bigger than the rest of them, but you look at some of the moves, like the likes of Bournemouth taking that leap above, and without having spent anywhere near the amount that West Ham have over the course of the summer. Is it not a case where you lose your first 4 games of the season, you're suddenly in the relegation mire? I would have thought that West Ham are being talked about as a relegation candidate. Maybe you disagree, because when I say that they're the team that can rock up the table, like, we're talking a mid-table finish.
I could see struggles, okay, and like I've alluded to, I don't think it's done now. But what I'm saying is, spending that money, the progression that was made last year under David Moyes, to give him credit, that resilience, that togetherness, that hard-to-beat type system that he came up with that ground results, they started to build confidence because they were really on a downer. And again, Pellegrini coming in, an air of optimism. I just expect, mid-table is an absolute given. Yeah, it really is. But he needs to find the right balance of the team and the personnel, and go back to the reputations. Don't mind reputations. You have to pick players that are currently playing well to get results, because you take a slight foot off the gas or take liberties in any way at Premier League level, you will be done.
Yeah, the thing is, you talk about reputations. The one reputation that's yet to come to fruition this season for West Ham, but I suspect it will, is Felipe Anderson. With 32 appearances for Lazio last season, like they finished 5th in Serie A. There is a top-level talent, and that was a great acquisition from West Ham. Now, you had Yarmolenko obviously scoring twice yesterday, and Arnautovic leading the line. That's an unbelievably potent front three. If they manage to find that continued solidity in midfield, if Obiang and Declan Rice manage to put in those performances with one of Noble or Wilshere, then their front six is outstanding. It's just that back four. That is the reason why I think today might be considered from some parties as relegation fodder. But you're almost arguing my point, and I'm disagreeing with my own point here as we're going around in circles here.
No, it's not like it's. I still worry for them, but I just feel like why should, if I was a West Ham, why should I be worried about relegation?
Sure,
this shouldn't be an issue. This should be mid-table, striving towards that top 7. That's what West Ham should be, with the money they've spent, the infrastructure, etc. And I just don't think, because they lose the first 4 games, there's an air of scepticism around. I'm just sceptical, full stop, about West Ham because of the way the club's run. Probably.
Do they finish ahead of Bournemouth? Do they finish ahead of Watford? Do they finish ahead of Everton?
Do they?
Yeah, do they? That's your top, like the top big 6, and those 3.
They'll finish ahead of Watford. I'm not sure about Everton.
You think they'll finish ahead of Watford?
Yeah.
I disagree.
Okay, we'll have a 5 on that. We'll come back to that. We'll chat more West Ham with Gary Breen. Yesterday, Matt Doherty, another Irish international. I was a little bit paused there on the whole Declan Rice kind of international, but he is an international. Matt Doherty played very, very well at Molineux yesterday. Good win for them. After the match, Nathan Murphy caught up with him. Let's hear what he had to say.
We had Keith Andrews on the show on Thursday, and he was saying he was a bit concerned that maybe it was one of those situations where your face didn't fit with Martin O'Neill, and we pick up the papers this morning and your exact quotes were, maybe my face doesn't fit. Yeah. What do you do in that situation? Have you spoken to Martin O'Neill about it, about what you can do to make sure your face does fit?
No, not really. Just I guess I got to keep doing what I'm doing at the end of the day. But I guess he's the one who picks the team. It's his choice, and he doesn't pick me. It's just his choice at the end of the day. I mean, I can do stuff about it in games and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's up to him, and he picks who he wants to pick. So I've got to respect that.
He made his comments, obviously, saying he felt you played it inside a little bit too much. He wanted just to be more direct. Your manager here is obviously very happy with what you're doing and said that on Friday. That listen, I want him to stay doing exactly what he does. Is it in you? Do you have to look at yourself now and think, when I go to Ireland, I need to do something different, or you just keep playing your own game?
Not necessarily. No, we play a certain way, and it's the way we play suits me. I can't change it. Just if I'm going away, it's not natural for me, so I'm just going to play my own game, and that should be good enough at the end of the day.
Were you surprised when you heard those comments from Martin O'Neill? Was that something that you'd been hearing already during the training sessions?
No, not particularly. I hadn't heard that. No, so I've never really been told that going forward was a problem. That's normally the better part of my game. Right. So I was a bit surprised that it was going forward, but I thought it'd be more defensively that I might have an issue. But that's his opinion at the end of the day. You got to respect that he's the manager.
So what do you do now? Just put the head down for the next month and try and give him no choice?
Just head down and keep playing games. I'm living the dream at the moment, playing the Premier League. I've grown. That's what I grew up as a kid wanting to do that. So I've got to just stay in the moment. Hopefully it continues like this, and we have a great season.
Well done. Enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
Living the dream at club level. He's certainly not living the dream at international level. He's right, there's only so much he can do. I'm obviously with him in his thought process of, he's clearly frustrated, can't probably understand why he's not in. Certainly against Poland, because look, Seamus Coleman, when fit, I think is our best player once he gets back up to full speed after that horrendous injury that he had. So there's no divine right for Matt Doherty to be playing, but he certainly should have more caps, in my opinion, than what he's got, and obviously still not capped competitively.
Like, that is the thing. Like we were saying it on OTB AM this morning, only half tongue-in-cheek. That imagine if Ronald Koeman capped Matt Doherty and suddenly it becomes a different situation. That
but he
won't
suits a
happen
Dutch style. There's no doubt about it. The way he plays suits a possession-based team, attack-minded, full-backs getting forward, which is the way the Dutch teams play. He would slot in seamlessly. I was just saying to you that the shirt colour from club to international level would be seamless.
The thing is, you go back to the Wales game. Is that the game where you would have capped him competitively? Just Cyrus Christie on the bench and Matt Doherty at right mid? Is it as simple as that?
No, I don't see him there at all.
Okay.
Cyrus Christie, for the type of game it was basically a shut-up shop. That was the thinking on that side of whether they thought Bale was going to play on the left-hand side, where they doubled up with Seamus and him. I don't see Cyrus in that position. I see them very much as wing-backs. But having said that, most modern-day full-backs play like wing-backs now anyway. I think Matt Doherty coming on to play, he's very, very impressive. And I mentioned this the other day to Nathan on Off the Ball, that they all have different qualities, and the points that Martin was making about Matt Doherty, Matt alluded to it. He felt his issues were defensively, and I would be with him, because last year at Wolves he probably wasn't tested enough defensively. He was like a wing back. He was attacking time and time and time again, whereas this year he's going to have to slide in as a back five and defend as an out-and-out right back at times, like he did against Manchester City, for instance, and then they counter-attack from maybe a little bit deeper than they would be used to. But, I feel from it at the moment. But he needs to just keep his head down, keep going the way he's going. He can't affect, really, what Martin and the management team are thinking. He can only keep producing performances exactly like he did yesterday, which was very impressive.
Should have scored, though.
Yes, he should have scored, yeah. Should have scored. He's better at own goals, isn't he?
Yeah, well, that's it. He was in that interview with Colin Young yesterday in the Sindo, the way he spoke about getting really wound up with people who said nice goal to him after the game, which, to be fair, it's like, who goes up to a fella after scoring an own goal and says nice goal? It's not a great thing to say. But like, just on that missing of the chances, like, Wolves, I wonder, does this become a theme throughout the year where they play this beautiful brand of football and just have no end product? 78 shots, 5 goals so far this season. It tells its own story.
Well, when the summer came around, you've heard me bigging up Wolves all last season with the style of play and certain individuals, Neves and Helder Costa, Jota, even Willy Bolly, centre half. I felt there was like a real kind of core of supremely talented players that would easily play in the Premier League. One area of concern would have been centre forward. Didn't sign a marquee centre forward, and the finances that they have at their disposal, I felt they were linked to Andre Silva from AC Milan, Portuguese international. That didn't come to fruition. I'm not sure about that one anyway. He's never done it enough for me consistently. I know he played and scored recently against Italy for Portugal, but I felt that would have been one area. So that doesn't surprise me. That's that. All the play, all the possession, recycling possession, lots of penetration, lots of pace in behind. But that little final piece of the jigsaw may well be missing at times for them. Yeah,
you'd wonder who is that person in that Wolves role, because it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if Espirito Santo was just looking at Andre Silva and is like, nah, doesn't suit our style. We would have to create a team around Andre Silva for him to slot seamlessly into us. So I think that might have been part of it, why those links broke down. Like, who do you pick from the Premier League now? If you had the pick of anybody outside of the top 6, it's hard to choose, because all those centre forwards are quite British centre forwards. It's the one part of British football that is really maintained outside of the top 6 in the Premier League. It is the fact that the likes of Glenn Murray can still exist in the Premier League and do quite well.
Well, it's I don't really see David Moyes on Super Sunday yesterday, and he was basically saying that he was a top centre forward away from challenging for the title. And he mentioned in the game yesterday with Everton and West Ham, he felt that if Arnautovic had been on Everton's side, they would have won the game. That's the
it's a fair point.
You're set up in a certain way, and look, I would have been a foot soldier, I would have been a legs and provide security to a team, and you need the marquee players. You need the players with that little bit of magic to unlock the doors and ultimately get you the goals. It's the hardest thing in football to do.
Yeah.
One man who might disagree with that is joining us on the line is Gary Breen. Gary, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, lads.
Listen, we're just chatting about Matt Doherty at one of your former clubs, obviously Wolves. What's your take on where he stands in the international setup? And have you been as impressed maybe as I've been with his general performances for Wolves?
Yeah, I've been so impressed with him. And it was interesting that in terms of his disappointment not getting that start in the recent friendly, that the emphasis would have been on him and the spotlight as such to see how well he performed at the weekend. And you have to say he was brilliant. And it kind of makes a mockery then of what Martin O'Neill was saying about the reasons why he's not getting into the team. And I think Doherty himself has said, listen, initially when I came on, Martin was talking about I had to improve my defending, then I had to improve my attacking. He says, I don't know what he wants me to do. So he really has put the pressure back on the manager. But fair play to him. That's what you want your players to do, to literally say to the manager, come on now, I'm playing so well, you've got to pick me. And I've had this debate with you many times, Keith. I know what Christie gives us in terms of his energy, but I'm not convinced about him defensively. And I think Doherty's far superior defensively, and I think he's actually more productive going forward.
Yeah, look, I agree, and I've just been chatting to Owen here about it, and I would have been in that camp of what what is Matt Doherty going to be like defensively in the Premier League, because they dominated vast majority of games last year in the Championship for Wolves. So he's clearly worked on that. I think he's improved on that. He's aware of it. But when you get mixed messages from a manager where it's initially it's defensively, then it's, well, no, I want you to be more powerful. I want you to take players on. Well, come on, you got to recognise the strengths of your players. He hasn't got the pace and power of a Cyrus Christie, but he's far better in possession. He's far more creative once he gets into that final third.
I think as well, he's more intelligent in terms of the positions he takes up. Now, listen, I'm not going to ignore the fact that the Wolves dominate the ball far more than we ever would do in an Ireland team. So he's able to slowly but surely get into those good positions and take the ball. But I think criticism that he's not as good in the final third, that was showing up at the weekend, because he created the goal. He was in the box with opportunities for himself to score. He was crossing, quality crosses, and then he was getting back doing his defensive shift. Now, if there's an argument that we may well go to a back 3/5, then he looks like the main guy in that right wing back role for me. But as he said, and as we're probably drawing these conclusions, sometimes your face just doesn't fit.
Yeah. How does he get in the team though with Seamus Coleman, assuming Seamus is fit next month? How do you get both of them in that team for you?
Well, I think that's what you have to do, especially with the Irish team, that you don't have such strength in depth. You've got to recognise that we've got players who are playing and performing very well in the Premier League, and potentially you could say to Seamus, does he play on the right of a back three, and you could do it that way and then put Doherty in the wing back position. But you may well, you could even argue that if you wanted to beef up that midfield and you played a flat four, play Doherty in front of Seamus then, as opposed to Christie, because I think that Christie's strength is coming from deep, from full-back. I don't think he can play right midfield, because I don't think he can play on the half-turn. I don't think he's good enough to step into midfield and find those pockets of space that Doherty has proved. But listen, it's all ifs and ands. We have to know who's available for that big doubleheader next month. But certainly he's given a great account of himself.
Gary, when you played for Ireland, we had an embarrassment of riches at right back, going back to Stephen Carr, Steve Finn,
amazing.
Dennis Irwin. Like, how did that dynamic work in the dressing room at that time? Because obviously they can't all play.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was so different in terms of what it is now, because they weren't just top Ireland players, they were top Premier League players. You had Stephen Carr, who's a flying machine, brilliant, a bit underrated really. He got that injury just before the World Cup, so didn't go to it. Steve Finnan, who's was such a Rolls Royce at right back. And then you had other guys below them, like even the likes of Jeff Kenner, Curtis as well. There were so many of them. Kenny was a right back initially, and we've just been blessed with him. And obviously you said about Dennis Irwin, who's arguably the best fullback we've ever had, could play on the left-hand side, and we've never had that type of strength and depth on the left, but that's just the way it was then. We just were producing brilliant players. I've not even mentioned Gary Kelly, who's the likes of Ryan Giggs says is his toughest opponent, so it just shows you. But that, in terms of your question, I think in the World Cup, Mick put Gary Kelly as a right midfielder and said, listen, a similar way that you might say with Doherty now in terms of behind Stephen Finnan, and said, like, listen, out of possession, you'll be great doubling up, but we know that you're good going forward. So that's something that the coaching team and management team have to work out. But certainly when the player's in a form that Doherty is in right now, he has to be in our starting 11.
With Wolves coming up from the Championship, huge expectations, especially with the finances that they have at their disposal, and they were so impressive last year. What were you expecting of them, and have you been impressed with them?
I've been really impressed, and for an ex-player, I didn't see as much of them in the Championship last season as I would have liked, but obviously I spoke to Matt Murray, who was talking about the coaching that Nuno's doing there, and was obviously saying to me, I'd love it because he's so organised, everyone knows their exact role, what they're supposed to be doing. Music to my ears as that type of kind of football geek as such. I want to know that my managers, my coaches are doing everything possible to make sure that the team performs on the weekend. That's been a massive talking point at the moment with the Irish team. I don't think we're doing that. But in terms of coming into the Premier League, I didn't think they would struggle because they've got quality players and coupled with that organisation. But certainly what has been impressive is the fact that they're able to tactically adjust. We've seen how expansive they are, that they're having 30 attempts on goal against a Burnley team and normally so resolute. But the performance that stood out for me was the fact that he changed his tactics slightly against Manchester City. They were able to defend deep in numbers, but in comparison to what Rafa Benitez is doing at Newcastle to try and compete, they were a threat to Newcastle on the turnover and the counter-attack. They were brilliant the way they were coached. They recognised where they were supposed to be as soon as they forced a turnover, and they were able to punish a team as good as Manchester City. So it bodes well for Wolves. I know there's a massive project in terms of the investment they've got, But what an exciting time to be a Wolves supporter.
Yeah, definitely. Joe Hart was saying yesterday that they're the best team he's ever faced that have come up from the Championship, and got me thinking, if they are the best team that have come up from the Championship in the Premier League era, like, there's very few teams that you could name that are potentially at that level. Like Newcastle, obviously, when they racked up close to 100 points, when they got promoted straight back up, had an outstanding team. Fulham, you were mentioning earlier on as well.
Ghana's Fulham team, Breen. I don't know whether you remember them. I thought they were outstanding. Lewis Zaha. But this team, we got asked this question quite a lot last year when they were on that crusade and looking like they were going to smash all types of points tallies, Wolves. But it was the style of play, and it's not just possession based like a Swansea maybe under Martinez or Brendan Rodgers. It was different strings to their bows. They have the big long raking diagonals from Neves. They have the willingness to run in behind. The two wide players that play in front of the wing backs, they can stay wide at times to provide that 2v1 in wide areas, or they roll inside and they create a little bit of a box in there. It's constantly guessing. It's constantly evolving throughout the game. I don't know what you mean, but like you mentioned about the coaching aspect. He's clearly on the training ground non-stop, because those players are certainly in tune, aren't they?
Exactly, and you're quite right, because they were more or less the Manchester City of the Championship, but they've been able to come into the Premier League now. And if you've only got one style of play, you're going to be found out very quickly, because that is what the Premier League does better than any league in the world. It works teams out straight away. And the direct comparison, and you're talking about the expansive football they play, look at Fulham this season now coming to the Premier League. They've not changed. No. They try and go against Manchester City in a toe-to-toe battle in terms of football, and they got put to the sword. This is what's so impressive about Wolves, is that they can mix it up. There is a fluidity about their formation, bearing in mind that they've played the same team every game this year, but they're able to adjust within that tactical regime, and that just shows you that the manager, the coaches are just putting in a brilliant shift with them.
You've hit the nail on the head. I was at Manchester City on Saturday, and I got asked before the game, what way are they going to set up against Manchester City? And I was like, I don't think they'll change too much, but surely fullbacks will have to be a little bit conservative. They'll have to kind of drop a little bit deeper. They'll have to obviously respect what is probably one of the best teams in world football, Manchester City. They didn't do that. 3-0 could have easily been 7-8-0. I could not believe what I was seeing. And then after the games, Jukanovic was basically saying, we're not going to sacrifice the way we're playing. Well, unfortunately, against the top teams, you're going to get an absolute doing.
Well, of course you are. And that's not even just for a promoted club. We're having the debate now about Emery at Arsenal and his philosophy in terms of how he wants to play. But he's going to have to be more pragmatic. And that's not a defeatist attitude. But he has to look at his players and say, well, I want to play this way, but I've got players who I've inherited from Wenger who literally cannot play that way. So he has to change it a little bit. And you're quite right. Fulham, really easy on the eye. I enjoy watching them. But they're going to learn some lessons quickly. And the very fact, Wolves will have to learn lessons as well, because as much as you said how dominant they were, 30 attempts on goal, they've only scored 5 goals. And I saw them at Leicester. They were brilliant away to Leicester. They battered them, and yet they lost 2-0. So you're quite right to identify that the focal point of that attack, they've got to get someone who takes the chances.
Yeah, it's going on.
The difference there, obviously, is when you're a manager and you look at players who clearly can't play your system. Well, like in the Arsenal situation, it's like looking at a goalkeeper who can't actually use his feet whatsoever, and you're constantly putting it on him. So there has to be surely like a balance there some bit. And I guess the kind of round pegs in square holes, or vice versa, square pegs in round holes analogy sort of comes to mind. Like, when it comes to Wolves, like, how difficult is that, Gary, to just go from that to that, just like that? Because it does seem that when they were in the Championship last year, it's almost as if they visualised being at this exact point. It was almost as if they were preparing to survive in the Premier League last year, when the Premier League hadn't even been reached.
Well, listen, in terms of their investment, that is what would have enticed those guys, the top names that they've got, that they say, listen, give us one season in the Championship, but we're going to create something special here in the Premier League, and you're going to be a massive part of it. That's what they would have got those players in. Neves at the base of that midfield, Keith, you'll know, he's a fantastic player. And for someone so young, that maturity, he says that his idol is Pirlo, but I mean, he's captain in Porto at 18. And
Pirlo wasn't doing what he was doing at 19, 20, by the way.
Well, we've had this discussion before, and like, imagine what it was like at 18, 19, and us two trying to play in the Premier League. It'd have been so difficult, and it just shows that maturity. And it's no surprise now that the likes of Guardiola have noticed it, in terms of that they need to beef up that holding midfield role as Fernandinho gets older, and they've identified him. But in terms of Wolves, I just think that you asked the question, how easy is it to be able to change formation? The answer is how good your coaching is. If your coaches are good and they make players understand it quickly, then it can be quite easy just to give a shout from the touchline, lads, we're going to a 5, we're going to a 4, we're changing. They'll be able to do it. But if you're just throwing it onto the sidelines and you've done no work on it on the training field, well, listen, you've seen the result over the last couple of weeks.
Come on, this is an international free zone this week, okay? We're sticking to club football.
We're just talking and admiring. We're admiring.
We are admiring, yeah.
Coach players.
Listen, talk to us about, you were at Newcastle on Saturday with Dave McIntyre doing the comms. Talk to us a little bit about Newcastle first. You mentioned a little bit about their setup. Was it as defence-minded as we've seen from Rafa, or did he let the shackles off a little bit?
Well, it wasn't as defence-minded. Obviously, the priority with Rafa Benitez is always defence first. It was that when he's got the likes of Torres and Gerrard at Liverpool. So he's not going to change when he's struggling at Newcastle. Excuse me. But he obviously identified there's a weakness in this Arsenal back four that there isn't possibly with Chelsea or Man City or Spurs when you're taking them on. And in those three games, in what's been a really tough fixture list for Newcastle in terms of playing some of the top boys in their opening 6 games, they managed to stay in the game against them teams, but their possession stats were woeful. It's something like 19, 20%. That's not good enough to try and challenge someone. But certainly in that opening 15, 20 minutes, every time they got the ball, they looked to turn Arsenal. Arsenal's defence was high, and they got in behind them, and Arsenal was shook. They were struggling. There's no doubt about it. But you just felt that if you don't score when you're on top, and Newcastle didn't, that Arsenal's quality would come through, and the brilliant free kick from Xhaka to break the deadlock. From that moment on, Newcastle didn't lay a glove on Arsenal.
Yeah, the Xhaka thing is quite interesting, because I always think he covers up his blemishes with like a thunder bastard like he did on Saturday, and that's just the way it is.
He don't cover him up enough.
But there must be something deeper there, because surely somebody of Unai Emery's intelligence, or perceived intelligence, let's just say he's an intelligent man. I presume he relatively is. Like, he surely can see what we can see when it comes to these huge flaws, or these apparent flaws in Granit Xhaka's personality as a football player, but yet he is clearly his number one midfielder. Clearly Guendouzi is below him, and obviously for some strange reason Torreira also seems to be below him in Emery's power rankings. What is it that is keeping Granit Xhaka at number one in Emery's view of his central/holding midfielders?
Well, ultimately, what it is what he gives you on the ball. And I think his stats prove that he's one of the best midfielders in terms of making passes into that final third. So if you're thinking about getting the likes of Ozil, Ramsey on the ball, Aubameyang, then you need a service to get into there. So his stats stack up that way. But you're quite right. Out of possession, he does not have the athleticism. He doesn't have the mobility. It's the very reason why he's been booked something like 26 times in a couple of seasons, sent off a few times. He just can't get there. He can't tackle. And you're right. For the life of me, I cannot understand how Torreira is not in that team. He comes on at half-time, and Arsenal's whole outlook on the game changed. He was bossing people for such a young player as well. And he was actually dictating to Xhaka in terms of, OK, if you step in, you want to make passes. He's got the intelligence then just to get into good defensive positions so that when Arsenal lose the ball, they're not going to be opened up. Because bear in mind, the likes of Bellerin, Monreal, they're in advanced positions at full-back. So there's massive gaps down the sides of two centre-halves who are so not mobile. It's incredible. Yet they're squeezing up the pitch. It just doesn't. It's a recipe for disaster, really, until he gets to the transfer window. And that's why you have to say that he must be delighted that they're 7th at the moment, because they're nowhere near the top 6.
No, they've scraped into those 3 wins in a row. I think it's fair to say. I don't know. The one thing I would say is that at least Emery has a clear definition of what he wants. At least we know that this is the order of the midfielders, and everything in terms of his depth chart seems to be quite definite. And like Ozil, speaking in the aftermath of the game on Saturday, was saying that he was really happy to play for Arsenal, especially under the new coach, which I thought was quite pointed. But the reason he said that was he knows what he wants. So as much as that might be like slagging off Wenger for not knowing what he wants, for changing things up, maybe the players these days just love a coach who knows exactly what he wants, he knows exactly who his best team is.
I think that's fair on, but if I was Mesut Ozil, I wouldn't be throwing any stones.
No.
Because he is absolutely in a glass house. There's no doubt about it. But his type of performance, he has landed on his feet getting that type of contract at Arsenal, because he is not getting it anywhere else, barring probably China. But in terms of the plan that he's going about it, I'd be interested to see what Gary thinks on this, because I think he has a definitive way that he wants to go. He's not going to veer away from that.
Yeah.
And Carragher and Neville had this kind of debate a few weeks ago on Monday Night Football, and I was on Carragher's side. I think he can tweak it, because I don't think the personnel that he's got available at the moment can do what he wants them to do, but he's obviously planning for the long term. And you've mentioned about transfer windows, getting a couple of key individuals in that will make it work. None more so than goalkeeper, because time and time again, if you want to play from the back, you need a keeper that can play. Petr Cech can't do that. We've seen it at Chelsea. We've seen it down through the years. It even took at Man City Ederson to come in to make that click, and obviously full-back areas as well. But what's your take on how he's going about it, Unai Emery?
I think he's given that squad that he inherited an opportunity. The board has probably said, listen, there's been huge investment in terms of what they've done there as such. So he said, OK, let's give him a go. And then he'll know in January who's good enough to play. But you're right about Petr Cech. For an iconic goalkeeper, it's uncomfortable to watch, because I was saying this in commentary. It looks like back when I had my first season as a professional, when they changed the back pass rule, that the goalkeeper couldn't pick it up. And it ruined goalkeepers. And the ball comes to him, and it's... He says about, I only made a couple of mistakes, and people are highlighting that, but it's not. He just can't do that. And there's a big difference. And you can have goalkeepers who are lovely strikers of the ball in terms of hitting it long, but there's other goalkeepers who can't deal with it around their feet. And, you know, we talked about Matt Murray, potentially an England goalkeeper, but a great striker of the ball, but he couldn't play with his feet. And he'd be the first to tell you that. But he's not the only one. The fact that Mustafi and Socrates, and I like Socrates, an out-and-out defender, but I'd expect him to be sitting on the 18-yard box and saying to people, beat me here. Don't expect to see him on the halfway line and people just turning him so easily. So Emery will identify that. There's no doubt about it. He'll look to get the legs in that central midfield area, because they have to press. And it was fascinating, even watching the game, that Ozil and Ramsey have to press from that second line of attack all the time. And I always question whether or not they could do it for 90 minutes. And then Ramsey actually asked to be taken off on Saturday because he was tired. Now, that's on the back of saying, like, he's had the double-header with Wales. But nevertheless, don't admit things like that. But it's been fascinating to watch. The very fact that Ozil, as you quite rightly said, under Wenger, was nailed in for that 10 position. Walcott wanted it, Wilshere wanted it, Ramsey wanted it. None of them could get it. Now suddenly Ramsey's got it, and Ozil's been pushed out onto that right flank, and I'm not sure he's that happy out there. But it's interesting because Ozil can't take on Emery. There's no way Emery's going to let a player dictate to him the way Neymar did at PSG. He's learnt his lesson, and despite him being on 350 grand a week, he won't have it.
There you go. More from the Keith Andrews Show on all our social channels, particularly on youtube.com/offtheball. And we'll look forward to the Champions League as well very shortly indeed. Just to tell you, it's Southampton 2, Brighton 1 in the Premier League tonight, 5 minutes to go at St Mary's. But all this week, we're giving you the chance to win the prize of a lifetime. You can be part of the Croke Park Challenge on October 23rd. It's all for thanks for Self-Help Africa. It's your chance to live the All-Ireland Day experience, including playing at Croke Park in a Cork versus Mayo match with sporting legends such as Henry Shefflin, Colin Cooper, Aidan O'Shea and Dean Rock. Will also be adding other players from the Dubs panel, as well as members of the Irish rugby team. And we can also confirm that one Nathaniel Murphy will be lining out in a far too tight Mayo jersey. The prize includes a pre-match meal in Leinster House, police escorted buses to Croke Park, full match day kit, the match itself on the hallowed turf of Croker, post-game reception in the Players' Lounge, and a gala dinner and show in the Hogan Stand. To be in with a chance of winning, just tell us, what team does Stephen Cluxton play his club football for? His club football for, bear in mind. It's all thanks to Self-Help Africa. For more details, get on to selfhelpafrica.ie. If you think you know the answer, text your name plus that answer to 53106. We will reveal the winner at the end of the show. We're talking Champions League next.
Football on Off the Ball.
In association with the faster-than-ever Boyle Sports app, with hundreds of pre-live and in-play football markets. Download it now. Boyle Sports. Time to play.
The Pat Kenny Show.
On tomorrow's programme, we're at the National Ploughing Championships in County Offaly. As well as the breaking news, we look at what more can be done to stop burglary gangs from targeting farmers. Catherine Fulvio on eating healthily when you have to hit the road. Jess Kelly will answer all your tech questions. And skin cancer and farmers with Celine Daly.
The Pat Kenny Show.
With MasterCard.
Tomorrow morning at 9.
On News Talk.
Every day I get up at 7 and I scramble to get 3 children out to school. So it's busy, but it's life. It's three children will keep you busy. Sometimes life throws you a curveball, you just have to work around it. I had a lump And as soon as they looked at it, she said, that looks like breast cancer. And that was it. Well, we took out life insurance when we bought our first house, actually. And then at that time, we also took out the critical illness with Irish Life. It is like a security blanket just to know that there is something in your account at a time when we needed it most. You kind of cherish moments, being able to walk up a hill or bring the kids out for a walk. I'm just so happy that it was actually Irish Life that was on the journey with me.
Find out more about Irish Life Family Protection at irishlife.ie. We know Irish Life. We are Irish Life. Specified illness cover gives a one-off payment if you are diagnosed with an illness we cover. Customer received a gratuity. Irish Life Assurance PLC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
The new 2019 Mercedes-Benz A-Class. It's a car that's a little more like you. How? Well, for starters, you unlock it with your phone. And with voice control, you can make a call, change the temperature, find a restaurant, pause the music. The new 2019 A-Class from €27,860. It's awesome. Just like you. Contact your authorised Mercedes-Benz dealership to try it out. Subject to availability, terms and conditions apply. Price excludes dealer-related charges.
The HPV vaccine protects girls from getting cervical cancer when they grow up. More than 200,000 girls in Ireland have safely received the HPV vaccine. The vaccine will be offered free to all girls in their first year of secondary school.
I got the HPV vaccine. I got the HPV vaccine. I got the HPV vaccine.
Find out how safe and effective the HPV vaccine is at hpv.ie.
Get the vaccine, protect our future.
From the HSE.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Now, the Champions League group stages get underway tomorrow night with the all-new bright and shiny 5:55 start times as well for the opening games. Barcelona and PSV and Inter Milan, Tottenham among those tomorrow. But to join us on the line to preview some of the other games across the next couple of nights is Leon Blanche from Boyle Sports. Good evening, Leon. I suppose we'll start with Liverpool PSG, because I guess in many respects it is the standout fixture. Liverpool, who went all the way to the final last season, and PSG with their front three, which are on form, if they're on form, can cause nightmares to any defence, and no matter how well stocked they are with the likes of Virgil van Dijk and Joe Gomez this season. We're talking about Neymar, Kylian Mbappe, Edinson Cavani, all of whom should be fit for PSG, whereas for Liverpool there are doubts over Roberto Firmino on that due to his eye abrasion, but the goals seem to be coming from elsewhere for Liverpool so far this season, Leon.
Yeah, look, Richie, good evening to you. Look, I suppose it's a good sign if you're a Liverpool fan that other people are chipping in with some goals. But as you rightly said, I mean, that front three of PSG is absolutely fantastic. And one of the best players in the world at the moment is Kylian Mbappe. He's got everything. He's got power. He's got pace. He knows how to score. He's just the real deal. But also you've got to look at Mane and look at Salah. Liverpool have got plenty of goals. And if you want to back Liverpool, they are favourites at 5-4, and probably rightly so. Their home record in last year's Champions League was outstanding. And no team really wants to go to Anfield on those big European nights. But PSG, they're a very, very capable side. They've let themselves down in the past couple of seasons in the Champions League. We all remember that huge lead they took to the Camp Nou and they fell apart. But with these three lads up front, there's definitely goals in their side. I think both teams will score tomorrow night. PSG are just under the 2-1 mark at 19-10. But as I said, I think Liverpool have tightened up at the back. They've got a world-class goalkeeper. Van Dijk seems to be making Gomez play better all the time. And I think Liverpool just about will win tomorrow night. But I think there'll be goals for sure. And I think both teams will definitely score at Anfield.
Are we expecting a high-scoring game in this one, Leon?
Well, I think, look, I mean, if you look at Liverpool, I mean, they only seem to know how to play one way, especially on those European nights, Richie. The crowd are up for it almost an hour before kickoff. The players are coming out. The atmosphere is bubbling along very nicely. I'd be looking at Liverpool scoring at least 2, maybe 3. And as I've already said, I think PSG will definitely get on the score sheet. Wouldn't surprise me at all if it was a 2-2 draw. Very high-scoring affair. But I just think Liverpool, with their European record and the way Anfield is on European nights, I think they might just get over the line. And in this group, I'd be looking at both of these teams qualifying for the knockout stages.
Mo Salah hasn't really fired so far this season for Liverpool. There are probably numerous reasons for that. And the presumption will be he'll come good at some point later on in the season. But Sadio Mane's chipped in with 4 goals in 5 games so far for Liverpool, and appears to be the man who's willing to bear the load in terms of goals for Liverpool so far.
Yeah, look, I mean, he got 4 in his first 4 games. I think one thing was quite noticeable at Wembley in the early kick-off on Saturday. I think both Salah and Mane were both at fault when at times there was a player in a far better position and they didn't either want to release and make the pass, or they tried to grab all the glory. So I think you could see Klopp demonstrating, especially to Salah at one stage, pass the ball. And I think over the season, I think both of these players, if you've got a man in a better position, just because you don't score, it's almost important to get an assist, set up a goal. But I think Mane, it's a big year for him. He's got the number 10 jersey. He seems to be relishing the prospect of putting it up, should I say, to Salah and even Firmino. Firmino, obviously, he's a doubt with that eye injury, but he's been back amongst the goals. That's three goals in his last 3 games, 2 for Liverpool and 1 for Brazil. But other players are chipping in. And I think the squad, Richie, now that Liverpool have got, Sturridge came on for 15 minutes. Shaqiri hasn't really featured that much so far for Liverpool, but I'm sure when they're playing nearly 3 games a week, Jurgen Klopp will have to rotate his squad. And I'm very intrigued to see, does Fabinho make his competitive debut for Liverpool tomorrow night? He will know PSG very well, of course, having come from Monaco. So there is options for Klopp, but maybe he'll stick with roughly the same team, barring if Firmino can't play, because it's early enough in the season. But I do feel Fabinho is going to have a huge role to play for Liverpool, maybe a little bit later on in the season.
Leon, you mentioned Shaqiri. We'll turn our attentions to Switzerland next, because it's there that Manchester United traipse on Wednesday evening. They're going to be taking on Young Boys of Bern. On paper, it seems very much this should be a straightforward outing for Manchester United.
Yeah, you would say so. In fairness, 2 good victories back-to-back away from home for United, away against Burnley, and of course they were the first side to beat Watford in this year's Premier League, winning 2-1. However, they did hang on toward the end of that game, but it was still a huge win away from home for Jose Mourinho. And I think Manchester United, they're 8-11, and we would be surprised. Young Boys, great achievement, getting into the Champions League, but you would expect United, they should be able to go to Switzerland and claim all 3 points. And I think when you look at this type of game, Richie, these are the games you want to win. You want to get your qualification into the knockout stage done as early as possible. They don't have a fantastic group, and they'll be looking at Young Boys and claiming 6 points away first, and then of course at home. But you'd have to fancy Manchester United. I think they'll take all the beating tomorrow night, and no surprise to see them odds on, even away from home.
Are we looking for them to fill their boots in terms of goals tomorrow night as well, Leon?
Well, look, I don't think you're ever going to see a Manchester United team, Richie, go all out and try and score goals and goals and goals. Mourinho is happy if they go 1 or even 2-0 up. He's quite content just to soak it up and drain out the game. He's not all about scoring 3 and 4 and 5 goals. So I think if United were to get a couple of goals in front, don't be surprised if they just put on the brake and take it handy, come home with the 3 points and focus on their next Premier League game.
Good man, Leon. We'll leave it there. Leon Blanche from Boyle Sports, looking ahead to the Champions League action, which gets underway tomorrow night at 5-6. Bemi Rash after this short break.
I remember lying back, pillows on me bed late afternoon, looking at the top of my wardrobe, stacked with boxes of Moro bars. Batch low, not the heels. And Butter's another thing over the last couple of years. I've
Hey, I'm Roz Purcell, and I'm on Repak's Team Green. We want people in Ireland